Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. This is part of the National Recycling Coalition's series of webinars associated with the National Zero Waste Conference. Today's program is specifically implementing zero waste on campuses and in businesses. We have an excellent panel that I'll introduce in a moment. But before we go much further, I want to just go through a couple of housekeeping items. If everybody's lines are going to be muted today, but we do encourage folks to submit questions. You'll see on your dashboard that there is an area where you can click on questions and you can type in questions at any point. I'll be saving these up, and as we go through, I will, as they're appropriate, I'll ask the questions out loud for our panelists to respond to. And we, as it says here, we are recording today's program, so if you're not able to participate in the whole program or want to come back to it later, you'll be able to do that. So as I said, this is one of a series of webinars all leading up to the main conference, which will be on December 1st through 3rd. We have some excellent programs coming up after this on October 8th, Reduce and Reuse. And then on the 22nd, we have several programs. You can find all the details and descriptions for these webinars on our website at zerowasteconference.org. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, without whom we would not be able to put on this conference. On our highest level, we have Recology, we have Waxy, and we have Paint Care. We also have Recycling Partnership, Zero Waste Sonoma, the Mattress Recycling Coalition, Mobius Intelligent Systems, Strategic Materials, Zinker Recycling, and Green Mountain Technologies. We also have other lower tier sponsors who you can find details, including descriptions for all these sponsors on our website. And we encourage you to give them a shout out and thank them for supporting the conference. I want to give a special call out for one of our sponsors, Paint Care, which is a paint stewardship organization that operates 1,800 drop-off sites in 9 states for convenient paint recycling. Learn how to use up leftover paint and recycle the rest at paintcare.org. So thank you to our sponsors. We have a partner for today's program, and I'm going to switch here to the next slide. I'm going to introduce Julie Muir to say a few words about the Zero Waste Campus Council.
Thanks, Alec. The Zero Waste Campus Council is really excited to be a partner with the NRC and putting these panels together. We are a technical council of the California Resource Recovery Association, and we used to be the California Collegiate Recycling Council, but we changed our name because we want to focus just on campuses. We see there a lot of commonality between a university campus to a hospital campus to a business campus, or anyone who's managing multiple buildings. We all know we have different personalities in different buildings, different systems to go through. And so we're just kind of pulling people together to share best practices and the challenges that we go through. We coordinate on Slack, so you can find us at the ZWCC workspace. So feel free to join us on Slack and our conversations there.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And thank you for the Zero Waste Campus Council for joining us with this program today. So, as I said, we have an excellent panel today. We've got representatives from some of the leading colleges and universities and corporations in the zero waste movement who are joining us today. We'll start off with Julie, who is a Zero Waste Systems Manager from Stanford University. Following Julie, we'll have Sue Beats Atkinson, who is a Senior Director of Sustainability for SBM Management. Then we'll have Danner Dowd Martin, Associate Director for International Business Development at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. Next, we'll have Mary Curtis, Global Head of Energy and Sustainability with HP. And then we'll finish off with Katie Robbins, who's a Zero Waste Manager from Boston University. Now, for our program today, we're going to divide into 2 different segments. We're going to start off with just quick 5-minute introductory presentations from each of our panelists, giving a high-level overview about the zero waste goals and plans that they have put in place at their institutions, just to sort of set the stage, give us a sense of what it is they're doing and the directions they're going. And then after those, we will switch formats into more of an interactive discussion panel where we'll have a series of topics all related to the implementation phase once you actually have your programs or your plans in place. And we'll ask each of them to sort of discuss a little bit more in depth how they're actually implementing it, and try to make that more of an interactive discussion. As I said, you can type in questions throughout the program, and I'll use my discretion as when it's appropriate to actually seed some of the questions to our sponsor or to our speakers. We'll take one or two after each one of their individual presentations, but then hold most of them for the discussion at the end. And with that, before we get started, we're going to do a couple of poll questions. And our first one here, and Bob, if you want to go ahead and set it up for folks to see, interact live on their screen. But we want to learn a bit more about what your role is at your institution and how you are, how you personally are involved. So you can see here, you can click on your screen, click any one of these options here, select any that apply if you have multiple hats that you're wearing. And we'll take just 45, 50 seconds for folks to fill these out. and then in a moment, we'll be able to see the results. So go ahead and fill that out now. Okay, we'll take maybe just another 10, 15 seconds. Bob, let me know when it seems to be taping off and we can switch over to the viewing the results.
We're at 86% voted so far and still coming in.
Okay, good. Thanks, by the way, to Bob Hollis from Mobius, who is helping us with all the technical support for this and all of our future webinars coming up throughout the fall. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the results now, it looks like. Good, so you can see a lot of folks who are involved on the policy and planning side for recycling and waste at their respective institutions. And then we have a number of operational folks on the recycling side. And then a lot of other, so a lot of folks who are playing other roles within the recycling zero waste field. Great, so we'll come back to some additional poll questions later, but let's go ahead and move on now to our first presentation. And we're going to start off with, we could switch over. I think we're going to start off with Julie Muir.
Right. Okay, Julie, you should have the keyboard.
There we go. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone on the call today, on the webinar. I'm Julie Muir with Stanford University. I'm the Zero Waste Systems Manager, and I'm going to share with you Stanford's journey and the journey that we're on to get to zero waste. So Stanford University is located in Stanford, California, which is near Palo Alto in the San Francisco Bay region on the peninsula. We're a fairly large university. We have 32,000 students and faculty staff. We are located on 8,200 acres with about 700 buildings. We have a medical school. We have a national lab, Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. Another unique feature, about 92% of our students in a non-COVID era would live on campus. We also have residential campus housing for faculty staff as well, and we're part of the Pac-12. We generate about 26,000 tons of waste annually, and currently we have a 66% diversion rate based on actual weights. So we're really excited to be on this path to zero waste. We've been on it for a long time. We've started our recycling programs in the 1970s and have continuously improved them, but eventually decided to set some goals around this. So in 2018, the university president, as part of the long-range planning process, set a goal of zero waste by 2030. Through this process, we've been setting up a zero waste plan where we went to gather waste source data and diversion solutions, and we estimated costs, and just working with a lot of stakeholders, we created a waste cost model. And through this process, we had guiding principles of looking at what we buy and how we buy it, and how we can reduce waste how we should look at reuse, compost, recycling, and the last of landfilling. We did a lot of stakeholder engagement to get different departments to buy into it, give us their ideas of what they need to do. Once we finished with that, we did a peer review of our waste cost model to see if we were on the right track, and we were. And we just keep refining that and doing some financial planning. And now we're kind of at the implementation. Through that process, we also did a waste characterization study that really showed the campus that we can get to zero waste, because at the bottom of the slide there, we have that over 60% of the stuff going to landfill today is actually recyclable or compostable or otherwise reducible in some way. So the zero waste plan gave us a pathway to zero waste. It identified 45 different programs that together will allow us to reach 90% or higher. When we developed our plan, we were able to kind of estimate the tons that we thought each program would give us. And then adding that up, it actually made us arrive at 93% by 2030. So one of the first things that we're doing in implementing our zero waste plan is looking at our buildings. 350 buildings approximately are associated with housing and dining, and another 350 are associated with more academic, administrative space or lab space. And so 350 of those buildings, we're looking at doing a zero waste building plan or pilots this year, where we're realigning contracts to create a more efficient waste system. We're looking at indoor changes of removing, we have these wheeled carts that are very difficult to handle. We're going to be moving to single stream recycling. We've been a dual stream recycling campus for a long time, and we're now moving to single stream recycling. Looking at centralized collection of corrugated cardboard. Right now, one of the key things is that our staff are supposed to take out the cardboard. That doesn't always happen, so it's kind of part of the waste system that's not working. Adding in composting, adding in paper towel collection, and then changing so that custodians are the ones moving all of the waste. And of course, outdoor doing right sizing and making sure that all the bins are at the right service levels. Now, this was all grand in February, March. We were ready to start our pilots and get going and start proving out what we've said we were going to do. But then, of course, COVID came. So then we had to look at, well, what can we do during this time of uncertainty, students not being on campus, budget issues, and all of those things. So we kind of pivoted and talked about a low touch system. What could we do in our program that corresponded to the things that the university was doing to make the campus safe during COVID. So we looked at some of the key things in our program is switching to single stream recycling, replacing the high wheel touch carts, because in the carts you have to touch the lid in order to put the recyclables in there, and switch to more of what we also use as a Rubbermaid Slim Jim to collect recycling so that you didn't have to touch anything, and then reducing the overall number of bins, and then assigning some a process to keeping those things clean. And then again, moving to custodial collection. And one of the key things that we were looking at doing was to we're planning to remove desk side collection of trash and recycling and move to only centralized collection. And we think this is so safer for our custodians as well. Lastly, I just want to just mention that audits and measurements, what's really key for us is metrics. We do a lot of work with dashboards with energy and water, and we want to do the same thing with waste. And we're looking at using data from our a program that our hauler uses, Recycle IQ, and we bring that into our building level rating system that's down on the right-hand side. But we're also looking at the interior and using some other technology to be able to actually using Zabel to monitor the contamination on the inside of the building and be able to give very specific training and reminders based on that data that we get in. So that's just a quick summary of our program to date. I'll hand this back over to Alec.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Next, we will have Subeet Atkinson from SBM. And Sue, I'll let you go ahead and advance your slide. And make sure you're
Thanks,
unmuted.
Alex. Yep,
Great.
I'm good. Thank you, Alex. I want to thank the National Recycling Coalition for allowing me to share some of the stuff that we're doing with some of our clients. SPM is a janitorial company, so we handle the trash, see a lot of trash. And one of our clients has a very large facility in the upper northwest that has been certified zero waste since 2016. Definitely not as large as a college campus, but I think we're all in alignment that campuses can be cookie cutter for the most part, depending on what they generate and how we communicate and educate the population. This client has a large volume of material, as you can see. During COVID times, it has a huge population, much larger than some cities, and we're currently diverting 92% of our waste. We were certified zero waste back in 2016 when it was the United States Zero Waste Business Council. It has been maintained year after year. In addition to that, we've had 2 different zero waste events with approximately 20 to 30,000 people at these hackathons that we're hosting. And we were gold one year and platinum the other. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of planning. It takes working with everyone involved, whether that's the construction team, the food service groups, anyone that they're bringing on site to ensure that they have compostables. At these events, we took that as a huge opportunity for us to communicate to the entire population. So not all of the waste stations had someone, but we manned those with a person that was constantly communicating and educating what went where. And what that did is it translates back into the offices and into the buildings so that they walk away with that saying, oh, yep, that yogurt container is landfill, not recycling. And so we've been maintaining that 90% diversion through the pandemic. We actually had a really good month last month for at hitting 95% diversion. One of the key things that we've learned through COVID is adjust. You know, the minute all of these folks started working from home, we did an evaluation on every one of our containers. We started moving some of the trash, and in a 5-month period, we saved over $400,000 on our trash recycling and composting. Again, you got to be proactive, aggressive, and know that you do have to move some of those items. One of the things that we feel is absolutely critical is once you've got that back of house figured out, it's how do we communicate? You know, if you look at janitorial, now we're lucky that we don't have a lot of turnover with our staff, but we have constant communication on what they need to do, how they need to do it, where it goes. We participate with the cafeteria because they do have turnover, not huge, but a fair amount that you have to constantly be working with them and identifying what needs to be recycled back of house, what they're using front of house, and how they're serving items. We have some locations that are doing durables, and we're tracking that as a reduction item. Signage is very important. Trying to keep it alive, it's impossible to constantly change signage. So you've really got to use any kind of face-to-face interaction, communication on website, anything that you can do to have fun with the program. One of the things that we've gone to is a very large spinning wheel that asks questions about things and where they go, and then they get a prize. Our typical prizes are like produce bags and reusable straws, so we're constantly just helping with that messaging. Lastly, you know, moving forward, we're still focusing on zero waste. It's a constant goal to maintain, to look at different things. We're looking at even a biocomposter for some of our compost material because of all the trucking that's involved in moving those volumes of material. As a company, they're looking at carbon neutrality by 2030 and how can we help with waste and custodial. We're looking at that greenhouse gas emissions by the truck movement, whether it's actually shorter for us to move everything into recycle. How do we do that? What's still going into the landfill? And we use waste analysis to garner that information. I mentioned that we're looking at equipment for composting. We currently have a waste sorting program. It's definitely been reduced with COVID and not as many people on, but what's involved with that? How do we look at that? How do we control that contamination level? Because we definitely have a huge amount of that. And then the last part, which we feel is most important, is waste reduction. How do we move that program to that next level? I'm going to hand it back to you, Al.
Great, thanks, Sue. So before we move on, we have our next poll question that we want to ask. And actually, even before we take the poll question, just a quick reminder that you can type in questions for our panelists at any time using the chat function on your dashboard. So I encourage you to type those in advance. So we have our next poll question. Does your organization have a formal zero waste or waste reduction goal specifically? And this is going to be just select just one option, and we'll wait for Bob to pull it up here. So now you can go ahead and reply to those. And we'll go ahead and wait another minute for this. While we're waiting for folks to reply, we had one question from Rob Arkle, which I'll put out to both Julie and Sue, either one of you. Are either of you, or are either of these organizations making a direct link between zero waste and the circular economy, adding in additional R's to the options, i.e. repair? Julie, do you want to respond to that?
We certainly are introducing the topic. We are working on getting a better understanding of that. Certainly we have some repair cafes that happen on campus now for repair. And we definitely took a good look at reuse. We have a surplus property. We have a lab share event that's really incredible. So like all the labs will bring out leftover materials that they don't want in their lab and bring it out to a kind of a yard sale of sorts. And that has reduced a lot of waste. It's kind of like a free cycle for lab equipment. And everyone's taking various things that you don't even know what they are, but they think they're a really cool product to have. So that's one way we've done that.
Great. Sue, did you want to add anything from your perspective?
Sure. I think the circular economy is one of the most important directions that we can go. And we're always looking at, reducing, completely eliminating and redesigning processes. It's a critical part. And 100 years ago, or it feels like that, the Toyota team used to talk about recycle some, recycle more, and recycle less. And that's where that circular economy drops in.
Great. Well, thank you. So just to recap the results from the survey, looks like we got a good 26% of our attendees have actually formally adopted zero waste goals. So that's fantastic to have that many folks. Bob, let's go ahead and switch back over then, and we'll continue on with our next presenter.
Mouse control.
Okay. Let me see
Dana,
here.
are you hearing us?
Yes, I just don't have mouse control.
Okay, are you able to move the mouse?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, all I see is the quick poll, Bob. I don't see.
Yeah, I think you need to close the poll first.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, everyone. Technology, awesome. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Hi, my name is Danner Dowd Martin, and I'm a staff member at the Haas School of Business, which is part of the UC Berkeley campus. As Alec mentioned, my title does not have really anything to do with sustainability. I'm actually a staff member that has been volunteering my time for the last 6 years on different initiatives all around sustainability. And one of the projects that I worked on was the Connie and Kevin Chu-Paul Zero Waste Initiative. So this is a new building that's part of the Haas School of Business campus. We have 4 buildings that are part of Haas. And as you can imagine, the UC Berkeley campus is just much bigger, but we decided that we were going to focus on one building. This building was opened in 2018. It is mostly classrooms, study areas, event space, and it has a cafe. So no office spaces. The amount of folks that come through this building on a regular basis before the last couple of months it's constantly changing. So like many of your campuses, in terms of stakeholder engagement, we're talking about lots of different students and staff and faculty and guests and so forth that are coming through the building. UC Berkeley has, like all the UC schools, has a mandate to hit zero waste by 2020 and also to be carbon neutral by 2025. One of the things that was really important for us that we were getting very close, and our campuses were about 50%. And so Lynn King, who is the director of Cal Zero Waste, who's on this call right now, brought the zero waste through the U.S. Green Building Council to us, True Zero Waste, and we decided to go through that process. Now, Chu Hall was actually designed for WELL certification and LEED certification, and so the building was already going down the path of looking at all the different sustainable options. But True Zero Waste was very much an add-on. So about 6 months before we opened the building, we started the process of really looking at how to become zero waste. As you can imagine, this was a really difficult process to add on. We used a lot of our defining leadership principles: question the status quo, students always, beyond yourself, and confidence without attitude, to get people to buy on to the fact that we were going zero waste. One of the ways that we really changed the design of the building is we opened the building with no landfill bins. So we instilled a pack in, pack out mentality. If you brought your waste in, you needed to bring your waste out. So everything in the building, in our cafes, in our event space, had to be compostable, recyclable, or reusable. This meant that, if folks are bringing in yogurt cups, they had to be educated that they can't be put in the recycling bin. So we really had to do a lot of education, marketing. We had to work with our cafe to make sure that everything in the cafe could be placed in the recycling or composting bin. So no chip bags, no bottled water, no soda cans. That is also part of the WELL certification, but we really had to redesign some of the ways that we are doing things. So for instance, we have all bulk bins, so people could still enjoy their snacks, but without any landfill waste. We also worked really closely with all of our different program offices. So we have 6 different program offices, and each one we have a VP of sustainability, and we're working through different goals in each program, whether that's eliminating single-use cups or working on printing solutions. And we've really had to do a lot of education because, as we all know with students, it's constantly changing. So you're having to really educate all the time. With COVID, we've pivoted a lot, like all of you. But one of the things that we're trying to do is keep reusables at the forefront of our messaging. So, for instance, some of our faculty are still coming to campus, and so we've now started a micro towel pilot program where folks can clean their surfaces, and then we take the towels to a laundry service, bring it back, and keep the reuse system going on. The other great thing is we are now moving one of our other buildings to zero waste. Because CHU was such a great blueprint, we were able to utilize all of our understandings and move it right over to our next building. So thanks for the time. I think I'm at 5 minutes, and I look forward to talking more.
Great. Thank you, Danner. And next we have Mary Curtis with HP. And go ahead, Mary.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. So at HP, we focus a lot on the circular economy. So would love to come back to that question and what we're doing there. But Obviously, our products are our main focus on circular economy, but it ties very closely to what we're doing in our operations. So HP as a legacy company focused on citizenship in terms of the environment and what we're doing for the betterment of the environment. This is a quote from our current CEO. We have a really strong sustainable impact strategy on the 3 pillars: planet, people, and communities. So those strategies translate into all our business units and then on how we operate as well. So we're excited about the legacy that we have and the legacy going forward. And we really think our products and our operations are a huge part of what we do there. So not only are we focused on our products, like I said, but our operations are a huge impact for what we could do in terms of the environment. We're in over 200 locations around the world, in over 50 countries. And so when you think about the impact that we have, it's enormous. In that portfolio, we have 17 buildings that are LEED certified and 1 building that is True Zero Waste certified. So I'll touch on that in a second. But what I love about what we're doing globally is that we're taking our learnings from a single site and able to really scale those and leverage what we learned to our rest of our portfolio. But a lot of our ideas are coming from different locations around the world, and what's possible in one location may not equate to the rest. But including our employees in this process has been a huge benefit for us. Currently, we are at almost 92% diversion globally. So we feel really good about that. Let's see, I'm trying to advance here. The site where we achieved zero waste certification is our headquarters in Palo Alto. So it's an iconic location. We've been in this site for 80 years, and it's on Stanford property. So great connection with Stanford. And also wanted to mention that Sue Beats with SBM was a huge partner for us in the certification process. So at this location, we've achieved 96% waste diversion. We've done that through a huge focus on our employees. Prior to me coming to HP about 4 years ago, most of our diversion was happening back of house. And we were still getting great diversion rates, but our employees weren't involved in the solution. So what we've done is really brought that forward. We've increased our employee engagement programs, starting with Earth Day. We've brought in a lot of vendors that are our partners in the cafe, and the employees can see the difference and be a part of the difference. So we've eliminated all plastic bottles in our cafe. We did get some initial pushback from some of our vendors there because there's a lot of margin on plastic when you're selling it, but not obviously much when you're recycling it. So that was a huge push for us, but we're really excited about what we've done there. So we were the first tech company in California to achieve zero waste certification, the second globally. And it was a great process for us because it certainly highlighted a lot of the areas where we could improve. We felt good about our program, but going through the process and the rigor of zero waste certification as a team with all of our stakeholders and partners, I think was something that we got a lot of value from, and we'll continue to do that globally. A couple of the activities that we did on site to support our program, we built an employee garden, and so this upper left-hand corner you could see, as a part of that, we did a compost education program on site, and the turnout and the excitement about the garden was huge. So something that we're also doing at other locations around the world. Partnering with our cafe vendor on food waste was huge too. We donate a lot of our food waste and think this is critical in food shortages in different locations. And so it's really meaningful for us and for our employees. And then we created some short videos in the right-hand corner that, like the other speakers have talked about, and educating our employees on how to divert waste. And so these videos are really fun and seeing other people from your site in the videos, I think makes it more meaningful too. Sorry, I'm trying to click. So we took a multi-pronged approach to getting to zero waste. So this is our global program. So right now in 2019, we're at 91%. In 2020, we're about 91.7. But starting with the zero waste certification at our headquarters is where we really wanted to make a story and then create that story and create the kind of the buzz about our headquarters globally. We have digital storyboards in all of our locations. The nice thing about our portfolio in terms of our operations is that we have the same vendor that we work with, JLL. So we can speak to them about the procurement activities and make sure that we have a consistent approach on things like plastic and how we're working with janitorial. And it's been a great way for us to really focus on some key areas. We're doing a zero waste workplace program, which I'll touch on in a minute, and then a highly visible Earth Day activities and a program that we call Reinvent Reuse. So this was our Earth Day activity. We had a Yammer campaign. Yammer is our intranet program that we can use for employee communications. So in 2018, this was how we drove to our Reinvent Reuse program. And we encouraged employees to submit ideas on eliminating plastic in the work stream. We selected one in each region as the winner, and we also gave them a zero waste starter kit. So it was a really fun program, got a lot of turnout. It was the most successful Yammer campaign at HP, which for us was awesome because it really showed across our company how important waste is to our employees. So it's something we're continuing to leverage going forward. And then our Zero Waste Desk program. So this is a program that we've touched on a bit so far. We've eliminated all of our desk side waste bins and gone to central waste, and really seeing huge benefits there, not only on cost, but our reduction in landfill rates have improved. So we've done audits after we've implemented this program and seen about 20% improvement in the locations where we've enabled this. I would say one of our learnings was change management. It was a huge challenge for us. We kind of underestimated it in the beginning, how much of an issue that was going to be. We have a great range in demographics at our sites, and so change management is something that I think we're taking away and going to be doing a lot more focus on that going forward. So that's it for me, Alec.
Great, thanks, Mary. Before we move on, we did have one question for you from
Sure.
Chris. How successful has HP been trying to eliminate polystyrene foam from product packaging? Is that, I don't know if that's an area you work on, but if you have anything to share.
It's not an area that I work on, but we do have some goals that we've established recently on product packaging waste. And so HP Co. has a great story on, we're the first company to include ocean-bound plastic in our PCs, and so it's a driver for us, absolutely, and we're coming around to where we can focus more and more on that.
Got it. Good. And then one other question we had from you so HP has banned plastic bottles in your cafe. What alternatives to plastic bottles specifically have you promoted? Reusable containers, cups, other alternatives?
Yeah, all of the above. So we've provided reusables for our employees. We've installed reusable water dispensers throughout our campus. Instead of plastic in the sodas, we've offered aluminum or glass. And so that hasn't been much of a transition issue for our employees, but I would say on the vendor side, it took a while for the vendors to come around to it. So it's an increase in, like I said, in cost and a decrease in margin for a lot of them, but they know our goals and they've just committed to being a strategic partner for us. So I would say overall, it's been a real success and removing the plastics from our cafes.
Fantastic. Good. We have some other questions for some of our previous speakers, but let's go ahead and move on to our final panelist right now, and then we'll come back and ask some of those additional questions. But next we have Katie Robbins with Boston University. And Katie, I'll let you go ahead and advance your slides and take it from there.
Thanks, Alec. Oh, we missed one.
Sorry.
No problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Robbins. I'm the Zero Waste Manager at Boston University. And I just have to say that is quite the lineup of panelists to follow. Tough acts, but I'm really happy to have the chance to share my experience. And thank you all for attending. So to give it just a quick look at the landscape at Boston University, we have almost 35,000 students. A good portion of those are international, over 10,000 employees, good number of buildings and laboratories, and we have 3 urban campuses you can see here on the map, just outside of downtown Boston, Mass. So to just speak a bit about how we got to where we are today. In 2009, sustainability at BU sort of becomes official. There are individual efforts made before this towards recycling and waste diversion, but in 2009, we have the first sustainability staff member. And we start seeing the development of what I call the standard programs, the ones we're probably all familiar with, right? Slim Jim recycling, desk side trash buddies, some food waste diversion, collection of cardboard, specifically during student move-in, some compostable container usage, and furniture reuse. So all of those progress over those 8 years. And then in 2017, we take a huge leap forwards with the adoption of our climate action plan, which really formalizes climate action as a goal of the university. And of course, zero waste falls into that third category of acting on indirect emissions. So in 2009, we make a bit more progress to formalize the zero waste efforts by the hiring of my position, which is the first time we've had a staff member dedicated to zero waste at the university. And first on my to-do list was to assemble a zero waste implementation task force, which is what I would like to touch on briefly here. So the task force was a group of 50+ stakeholders from around the university. We started with listening sessions for each member to sort of set the groundwork of what this process was going to be and to understand what they wanted to get out of it and how they wanted to see zero waste implemented at the university. From there, we organized into these 5 working groups, which became the foundation of how the zero waste plan is organized. We hosted weekly meetings with all of these folks. And it was a really successful and an exciting process. There was a lot of engagement. We also employed some community engagement tactics during the process. So we hosted 2 campus forums with the goals of getting general community feedback on the initial working group recommendations and to sort of bridge the gap between staff, faculty, and students to make sure everyone felt like they had a stake in what zero waste was going to look like at BU. We also had an online feedback form, which we got pretty good response to, 403 respondents. You can see it's mostly students. And we asked questions like, how do we create that paradigm shift in the BU community around waste and consumption, and a few other questions sort of in that same vein. We used the feedback that we got from both of these initiatives to inform the zero waste plans and the working group reports. So we do all of this and we have this beautiful plan and these 5 gorgeous working group reports full of really good information, data, next steps. And then it's February 2020. And I think we all know a little bit what that looks like. This is how it looks in my mind. That little flat line towards the bottom is my heart rate when BU announces that all non-essential projects are paused and shelved and budgets are frozen, which means the planning process, we can't formally announce the plan to the community. But after a period of grieving, we had to sort of figure out how to pivot from here, right? And as sustainability professionals, we have to be professionals in finding a path forward amid uncertainty. That's the job. So we pivoted our focus to two main projects, which I will dive into a little bit now. So the first is what I called a waste stream risk mitigation plan. It has a lot of similarities with what Julie Muir was talking about earlier in the panel, consolidating internal infrastructure, removing desk side bins and moving towards a centralized system, giving ourselves a facelift through this new signage that you can see here, all sort of framed through the lens of the time and money savings that everyone desperately is looking for during COVID. And we're actually getting a lot of support from leadership for this because the priorities of leadership and the zero waste plan are aligning during COVID in this way. And the second project that we've really decided to focus on is our resource management request for proposal, something that I am personally really excited about. It's a collaboration between sustainability, facilities, and sourcing and procurement to completely re-envision our waste contracts and pursue what is for BU, and I think for the industry as a whole, a really different kind of waste contract, one that focuses on partnership and technology and data and reporting. And among many goals for the university through this contract, we're also looking to influence the industry, right? So, of course, industry influence can't happen from the demands of one. So, anything I can do to help you all, anyone listening, any other panelists, in your journey towards getting more out of your waste contracts, if you're experiencing any of these issues or having any of these questions that I put here on my slide, reach out. Our process is going really well so far, and I'm very excited for the foundation that's going to provide us to build more zero waste initiatives off of. So with that, I will pass it back to Alec, and I believe we will move into the next section of the webinar.
Great, thanks, Katie. Before we shift over, we did have a couple other questions that had come in earlier. We'll go ahead and run through a few of those right off. Danner, Leah had a question for you specifically in Berkeley. Could you share who the dining vendor is for the Berkeley example that you cited?
Yeah, sure. For our cafe is run by a local business called Stradivarius, and they have multiple cafes on campus and off of campus.
Okay, great. Then another question for you as well. Is there any data on the financial impact of the Berkeley Haas snack bag free cafe?
It's a really good question. At the moment, nothing that's qualitative, just quantitative. The process was one that was a little bit difficult in that we were sort of forcing the cafe to go about this route, but in the end, they have been very successful with all the different goals that they put into place, including the snack goals. They were very upset about not being able to sell snacks, but because we worked together and figured out another way, they've been quite successful. So I'll have to dig into more actual data.
Got it. Okay, great. And then here's a question for really for anyone, specifically directed to those at a university. But from Angela, we had a question: are pilot projects, campaigns, et cetera, are these typically, from your experience, being financed by your university or your institution, or are you relying on external grants for these?
Our campaigns would be general funded, so they'd be supported by the university.
Okay.
For Boston University as well, that's generally the case. Though I will say we have some student projects that I think are funded from other sources.
That's good. That's true.
Great.
Ours is funded from all sorts of things, including corporate sponsorship, which was great. They came in to help support our students on working through the initiative.
Great. Okay.
And I might add that we have you have different kinds of campaigns and different ones that show up. We did a cup club project or pilot to introduce reusable cups at the coffee shop, one particular coffee shop on campus. And so that came through, different funding. But in general, if we're going to do a zero waste campaign, it's going to be from the general fund.
Got it. We have a question from Lynn. Daniel, your colleague over at Berkeley, is asking both for Julie and Katie, both of you, your campuses, you're shifting over to single stream, which for some can be a little counterintuitive given the context of where recycling markets are right now and the China national sword. Can you talk a little bit more about what's driving the decision to shift over now to single stream?
Katie, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. In the Boston area, it's really about processing facility capacity. So the MRFs that are available in the greater Boston area and the services the haulers are providing are more aligned with a mixed recycling stream than separate dual stream routes. Like Julie, we had previously had a dual stream system, but for several years now it's being collected as single stream, and so it's really more of a process of aligning, the processing capacity with how we're collecting on campus.
Yeah, and similarly, I would say that we are most of the cities in the Bay Area are single stream. I think there's 3 or 4 that were, and like we are included in the dual stream. And I feel like we have to constantly re-educate those people. Like when they come to campus, or the single stream recycling, if they do single stream recycling at home, and then they come to work, and we're like, oh, but here we do it differently, and we're constantly having to backtrack. And I think that's just I'm really a big believer in standardization. I wish everyone was dual stream. But I feel like programs need to be standardized so that people can recycle the same where they live, work, and play, because people don't understand, they don't want to comprehend that when they cross a jurisdictional boundary or a company boundary that the program has magically changed. I think it needs to be the same everywhere. So, and that's what people at Stanford had thought was best.
Got it. Great. We're going to go ahead and hold additional questions for the moment and shift over now to our to the discussion part of that panel. Before we do that, I think we have one more panel question. Bob, if you could either advance the slide or give me control again.
Go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Katie. A quick reminder before we do move on, all of the presentation slides from each of our panelists are available that you can download right now as a PDF right now on from your dashboard. If you look where it says handouts and expand that, we have both the presentation slides. We also have from Julie and Danner have provided copies of their actual plans or reports as PDFs that you can download. So feel free to do that to review on your own after the webinar. And as I said, we have a third and final poll question for folks to fill out. If you have a formal zero waste plan, which elements does it include, and check all that apply? Again, Bob, I'll let you switch it over to the live poll. there. Go ahead and fill that out. While we're waiting, we did have another question from Anastasia. Speaking of standardization, do any of you use the Recycle Across America standardized recycling signage on your campus? I'll throw that out to anyone who has who may or may not be using that.
We do at HP, and we've modified it somewhat, but primarily that's what we use.
And as we're redesigning our labels at Stanford, we're redesigning our labels and we're taking into consideration Recycle Across America's designs.
Okay.
This is Sue. I would agree with Julie that we're using the color coding. Since we don't have a national color coding, we definitely are using similar to what they have. I don't know why, but they've incorporated a caution yellow, which doesn't always work, but they have an amazing setup.
At Boston University, we decided to align more with the state-specific campaign called Recycle Smart. It does also align with Recycle Across America, but has a little bit different of a look and feel. The city of Boston's designs align with the state's designs as well. So we decided to keep it a little more local specific.
Got it. Okay. Great, thank you. So we have the results from our final poll. Looks like we have among the different elements, just in general, engagement, behavior change seems to be the most common. But I do see we have a good number of folks who are using the self-service and centralized waste collections, and I know that's one of the areas of interest that I have that would love to follow up as we move into the discussion part of the program. So thank you everybody for filling out the quick poll. And great. So now we're gonna, as I said, move on and spend the rest of our program with more of an open-ended conversation. So we have a series of topics, but the idea is, so we'll take about 10 minutes for each one of these to focus on different elements of putting in place and implementing goals and plans. What I'm going to do is ask each one of our panelists if they have something specific to offer in response to the question that you see up here. Go ahead and take 30 seconds, 60 seconds to respond. And then if any of our attendees have additional questions, or if you have an example, something that you think is worth sharing on this particular topic, go ahead and type that in, and I'll keep an eye on those. And where appropriate, I'll read some of these out loud. As we get to the end of that first cycle, we'll switch over to some other topics. And just real briefly, we're going to start off talking about lessons learned from the actual developing of the goals in the plan. So before actually getting to the implementation stage, just what was learned as you were focused on actually getting those in place. And then for the following segments, we'll take 10 minutes. We'll talk about just the operational and infrastructure aspects of implementing the plan. We'll shift and talk a little bit about the communication and engagement after that. And then if we have time, we'll specifically look at upstream and procurement side. But before we get to that, let's start off with this first question that we see here on the screen. The process of actually getting goals and plans set in place within your institution. Would love to hear what's worked, what hasn't, any lessons learned. And Julie, if you want to start off with any thoughts that you have.
I think everyone probably agree it's stakeholder, constant communication, meetings, talking about what your goals are, I think Katie mentioned listening and hearing what people's concerns are. That was definitely what we did, bringing in lots of different groups of people to talk about the possibility and getting people comfortable with the term zero waste. What did that mean, and could we really get there? And dealing with some of the disbelief of being able to accomplish it. But I think with our waste characterization study, we were able to really show people we could do it.
Great, Sue.
I think it's, again, stakeholder, but it's not only the people that touch the trash or generate the trash, it's also the different levels of listening, which Katie mentioned, now Julie mentioned. But what is involved? What is the call to action that you're asking each group to do? You know, some of this on the stakeholders part is, what are you ordering? Do you need to order it that way? Do you need to order as much as you're ordering? Things like that with the stakeholders. And I think the decision makers is a really important one, because I've learned through many, many different clients that it sometimes it's the bottom up, sometimes it's top down, sometimes it's middle trying to do top and bottom. And the end result is, if we can get the top down to even communicate once what the goals are, it helps people to participate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for us, you know, when we want to make big statements and big goals, we've got to have a communication strategy, and so so making sure that that strategy is laid out across HP for us is really key. That if we're trying to do it only in my organization, we're not going to get there. So so we want to really have a broad, sweeping and strategic communication strategy on setting those big hairy goals.
If I can
Katie, your dinner. Yeah, go ahead, dinner.
So definitely all the things that have been said were very important to us as well. We didn't have a plan. We just jumped right in and went without any sort of planning. And so for us, the True Zero Waste guidelines and the way that we were able to utilize that to just say, this is what we're doing, you need to get on board, was very important to us. And for us, as we've moved through this process, we've really tapped into each student group and given them sort of, you know, VP of sustainability of their program to get them involved and help us disseminate the messages with their peers. As we know, students like to hear from students and not students from staff and so forth. And so we've really tapped into those folks to help us spread the message.
And I'll just say that I echo every other panelist's response. Getting leadership to give that initial call to action is super helpful. I think once people are in the room, they'll see the light about the benefits of waste reduction and moving towards a zero waste system, but sometimes just getting them in the room is the difficult part. I also think doing your best to come up with measurable and measurable goals and a realistic timeline really inspires confidence, right? It makes this big amorphous task of reaching zero waste a little bit more tangible, which makes people more apt to be a part of helping you reach it.
Mm-hmm. So we can go ahead and just open this up for just a general back and forth discussion. I start off with one question. You know, obviously, for many institutions, in your position, recycling or zero waste manager, you go to your upper administrators and say, I have this great idea. We're going to eliminate 90% of our waste. It's going to involve lots of operational changes. Every different aspect of the institution is going to have to change how they operate. We're on board, right? It is not that straightforward a process. Is there anything unique to your institutions or the arguments that were made or other considerations that were a driver that helped to get the decision makers to the point of saying yes?
I think our zero waste plan came out of our climate action plan. So they fought and won the battle to get leadership to recognize climate action as an important goal of the university. And zero waste was argued as an important part of that because of the potential for cost and time savings, as well as the fact that it's something that students are asking for, you know, better access to recycling and composting, better options in convenience stores and things like that. So, you know, as staff of the university, it's always important for us to meet what the students are asking for. We're here for them. So I think those were the main arguments and how we got it across.
Anyone else want to address that?
Yeah, I would say one thing for us at HP was proving out the business case, that we could actually come to a number on cost savings. And since we were doing so much diversion back of house, that was a significant cost. So as we bring that diversion process close to our employees, we're not only improving our diversion rates, but we're reducing costs significantly. So I would say, you know, the business case is certainly a big driver.
For us, we really utilized our culture and just the culture of Haas and what we are trying to teach our students, as I mentioned, through our defining leadership principles. And we really tapped into those statements and have utilized those throughout all of our messaging in ways that are not only inspiring, but also shaming. And so that we've been able to get folks to come on board, and including, you know, those at the top.
Yeah, you have a certain, there's a culture, there's a momentum that you can just tap into. So we have a question here from Bridget, who and her question actually sets up a separate one that I have, but to start with hers, have any of you panelists considered calling your plan something other than zero waste, using different terminology? As someone had previously mentioned, the term zero waste, it can have a very specific context for different people. It means different things, and you can play a different role in terms of as a messaging. Yeah, I'll throw that question out. Have any of you considered using different terminology or other ways of framing what you're doing?
This is Sue, and I think that it depends, right? It depends on where you're starting at and where you're trying to go. I think it's also aligning that if, let's say that as an organization, a campus, you're trying to get certified as zero waste, you want to keep the terminology there, but maybe you've got to do it in different communication panels to motivate people to participate, to let them understand that we're not saying you can't generate any waste. We don't want to. We want to set it up almost like a Haas building, that there is no landfill. You don't get to have chip bags. And you can't set it up to be a negative. It's got to be a positive. And so how do you do that? You know, how do you explain that you're getting a more nutritious granola bar than you were buying the package that, I don't know if you guys have seen the commercial where they're pouring sugar out of a package. So it's just how we communicate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we did consider at Stanford calling it something else, and we went through various, names, but they never really presented the vision that zero waste is. I mean, a waste management plan. I mean, it is just a plan. It's just how you're going to manage your waste or how you're going to reduce your waste. It can be a waste reduction plan. All of those things are good, but the key for us was the vision of where you're going. And then again, that educational, bringing them along, it's 90% reduction or more. It isn't no waste, but it is thinking about it and waste sleuthing waste and figuring out where it's happening and how can it be avoided, and just having that constant communication that we ended up with eventually people buying into it, and also saying that zero waste is just a lot easier to say than waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, and all the other repair and all the other things that we want to say in that process. Zero waste is a lot snappier, and it does get people's attention, for better or for worse. It is a good term in that way. So I think we just went through a community process of getting people used to the word and what we were intending, and keeping that vision.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to add, at Boston University, we actually didn't really consider using a different name, but I do take a lot of care in the 90% diversion metric that's attached to it. I don't want people thinking that, you know, everything can be summed up into that one number. So I think our communication strategy is centered around getting people to understand that zero waste is a systems approach. It's not one necessarily one metric we're trying to hit.
And if I could add just now that because Haas did get the platinum level true certification, you know, we've been utilizing that in motivating folks, but now the messaging that I'm trying to get people to understand is that yes, we've achieved this awesome goal, but now we need to move to reusables. And so there's been a lot of education. Well, we're zero waste, so we're good, right? And it's like, yeah, no, we have a lot more to do. And so I know you guys are super stoked about getting here, but now we need to push, right? It's not about postables. We need to now get to that next stage. So, yeah.
And just one quick thing at HP, we have developed different names for different campaigns. And so like our Earth Day campaign was Reinvent Reuse. And that really goes with our culture in reinvention. And so even though zero waste will always be our moonshot goal, we can create campaigns that are going to, you know, be those measures to get to zero waste. But so maybe a theme around different programs throughout the year has been a good approach.
Mm-hmm. Julie, we had a conversation a while back, and you raised a point that I thought was really interesting. That I think also comes back to this core sort of topic here of how you get buy-in. And one is that zero waste is an excellent public-facing messaging. It helps to sort of set a goal that you're asking people to come along to, but a lot of your audience is internal. It is the facilities folks. It is the people making operations go, the engineers who, in many cases, zero waste can feel like a slogan. And so how do you communicate the same type of thing to a different audience who's not necessarily focused on where it's more of an engineering or that type of focus? And I know you would talk about how framing it as a systems, similar to energy systems or water systems. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that was interesting.
That's pretty much what it was. I took my cue from my fellow energy managers and water systems managers. They talk about their system and their, you know, their inputs and their outputs and their fixed costs and variable costs and their various kinds of jargon that's used in that system. And I thought it really applied to what I was doing. A lot of times waste is looked as a contract. You know, that's what's being managed is the contract and the cost of the contract, but not looking at the system in total of, you know, and the opportunities for waste reduction, reuse, and for upstream solutions that will strengthen the system. And also the waste system that may not be able to handle certain products coming into it. And what do we do then? So I started phrasing it as a waste system that has all these different features to it, to getting people to kind of come around and understand what we're trying to accomplish, that we're not just trying to get lower costs on our contract or you know, go to zero waste, but we're trying to manage the system of waste. And there's all these external things that come into it between EPR and other upstream solutions and downstream solutions. What is our market like with the, you know, with the Chinese waste ban and plastics and the challenges there and how that affects our waste system? So just using that, I think it's semantics, but it also helps people think about it differently.
Yeah, excellent. Let's go ahead and shift over to our next topic. So your goals are in place. You have administration sign off. You've got your plans articulated, and now it's moving forward. The actual implementation. I know each of you are different stages. Some are still in the beginning. Some have actually made it quite a ways down that process of implementing these. So I just want to throw it out. Maybe just talk first about some of the challenges that you found on the actual implementation. And Julie, I'll go ahead and start off with you first again.
Well, again, I'm at the very beginning because of COVID. I'm by about 6 months behind and getting things implemented, but still making good progress. And I think, operationally and infrastructure wise, that we talked briefly about it, which is the color coded system. The state of California is mandating the color system for us, and we have a ways to go until we have to do it. But it is a great system so that every time someone comes to a blue bin, it is a recycling bin. It is not some other kind of bin. And green, we use brown for compost on the campus, so we're going to have to move to green. But it is an easier system. So when they're at home and they see a green bin, it's a compost bin. And they come to campus, the green bin is also the compost bin. Another thing that we are working on in implementation is color coding the bags as well for our custodians. So I think that's going to be a huge help. Because sometimes compostables may not look like compostables to the person emptying the bin at the end of the day if there's a bunch of paper plates or paper towels or something like that. But the color-coded system with a compostable bag, a translucent blue bag, and then a clear bag for trash. And we're actually in the process of not using black bags because we can't see into them safely. So that's some of the operational things that we're coming up against or coming up with and making a better process.
Great. I'll throw it out for other panelists.
Oh, this is Sue. I'll go. As the janitorial supplier, I think what Julie said is really important about the color-coded bags. And there's ways to do that if you work with your supplier in the request to try and keep the cost at a minimum. They shouldn't have a huge, quote-unquote, cost with a change. But, you're going with fancy colors, it changes things. A darker color costs more money. But it helps the janitors. I think the other parts that exist is it's a perception thing, right? So there are a phenomenal amount of people that perceive that the janitorial staff sorts the materials out of those bins, and that's not true. They don't go through and pick out aluminum cans out of the trash can. It's unsafe. We've been poked by too many needles to even consider that. But I think that perception thing is really important, that how do you communicate with your employees that the janitors don't sort this? The janitors, and at least for the majority of our clients, we don't allow our team to make a decision if there's contamination or not. If that recycling is contaminated, it should be put into that bin the same way it should be if it's not contaminated. Because as a janitorial company, we get blamed because it didn't go into the right bin, but yet people are putting the wrong thing in it. And you won't know as a owner of the process that there is a problem unless I allow it to go into the bin. And then the vendors, waste management, Republics, whomever, then complain about your contamination issue. Operationally, I think it's important to realize, I think centralized trash collection is a great win with eliminating those desk trash and recycle bins. It helps people understand compost if it's available in your area. It doesn't work if you're trying to scrape plates. We've seen that be a huge fail because people just don't care and they throw the whole thing into the compost and then contaminate that. I think the last part of this is even the right sizing, both inside and outside. Sometimes the perception is we're going to empty that once a day and that's your centralized trash collection plan, and maybe the containers are too small. It makes it really hard to do centralized trash with Slim Jims based on capacity and volume in a common area, unless you have a lot of them. So I think there's a lot of things that go into that planning of operations, infrastructure, how you're going to pick it up, how you're going to communicate problems.
I think for us at HP, one of the biggest challenges has been creating a new policy that is really effective. So it's one thing to create a policy that just sits on a shelf or sits on your website, or that no one is really referring to. And so I feel like I'm constantly being challenged by, do our vendors really understand what our policy is around waste? And do all of our partners really understand what it is? And if it's not a requirement that they perform to policy, then, we're having to go back and constantly remind our vendors and all of our procurement agents that, these are the goals that we're working towards. So So that's been an operational challenge for us.
Great. We have a couple questions that come in that are sort of operational minded that I'll ask. Mary, for you, one, we have a question. You mentioned moving away from plastic recycling stream, shifting more to glass and aluminum, but the observation was made that in many ways aluminum and glass can actually have a higher carbon footprint than plastic. There are trade-offs, but is there any sort of calculation in your thinking and how you've pursued that?
No, we're not measuring the carbon that way yet, but I think for us, we have a huge push regarding ocean-bound plastic, and a lot of our locations are coastal locations. So we have a huge site in Puerto Rico, we have a huge site in Taipei and Singapore, and so when we look at ocean-bound plastic, that's really key for us. So we've decided to definitely have a huge focus on single-use plastic, and not just in bottles but also in to-go containers. So we've implemented reusable to-go containers for our food for our employees during lunch, and so yeah, we've definitely been consistent with our approach around single-use plastic.
Okay. Good. Julie, a quick question for you from Abby. During your presentation, you made reference to the program used to monitor contamination in bins. Can you repeat who the program and who that is you're working with on that?
Yeah, I'm working with a company called Zabble with a Z. And it's an app, a phone app that I can walk around and audit the bins and see what the contamination is. I can specifically label it, what the contamination is, and then I get a report at the end that tells me what is my largest contaminant in this building. It's kind of just an automated process, and then I also know where that contamination happened. So if it's a six-story building, I can say that the third floor on the right side is really struggling with this, with compostable cups being in the compost bin rather than the trash bin, or whatever the issue is, and then specifically target that group and say, hey group, I have data that shows me that you are having a problem with this product. Rather than talking at such a high level, the university is having trouble with this, or this building is having trouble with this. I can really narrow it down with this piece of technology. And I have a lot of good hope for it. I think on our building dashboard, we're going to add, what each building struggles with, according to data rather than just anecdotal. I've always kind of known what people struggle with as walking through buildings. Who can't pass up looking in a trash can, right? We all love it. We have this really bad habit that I even do on vacation, which my family's like, what? You cannot look in there, Mom. But this way I have data. That's what's important to my group, is data, not just anecdotal or just happenstance. So I can then point to that, and then I think I can get the behavior change that I'm looking for.
Great. The last question before we shift over to talking about more communication engagement, diversion metrics. The classic traditional way that we have measured progress with our programs has been with the diversion rate, but for many reasons we know there are flaws to that, least of which being that it does not really measure the impact of eliminating or reducing waste. But the question for each of you is, to what extent are you using other types of metrics to measure your progress beyond simple diversion?
This is Sue. I can address at least on the True Zero Waste direction years ago. Sorry, it sounds like dogs are barking. Years ago, we created our tracking mechanism to show your diversion, your reduce, your reuse, your compost, your trash. And then we created a section about zero waste. And that zero waste section was about reduction primarily. So, if you have a means to be able to track paperless paychecks, or our relatively small company compared to all of you guys is tracking our paper savings from not sending out benefits packets, but they send out a 5x7 card. And so there's ways to track China usage by working with the cafe team to say that they, had this many meals or this many plates, and then you can simulate weights to those. We've done that with quite a few of our clients. Some of them don't even like to track reuse, so it just depends on what their guidelines are. And I think the True program has really done a great job of allowing you to track that, allowing you to quantify all of your processes.
Great. Does anyone else want to address that?
A couple of the metrics that we've used are food waste. How much are we reducing our food waste? And then also we keep track of how many reusable water bottles are filled at our water stations. So so we can relate that back to our objectives there.
Great.
Along with our zero waste plan, we developed sort of an implementation timeline which lists all the initiatives and the time period in which we're aiming to achieve them by. And so it doesn't put specific data behind it, but it is sort of a way of showing like, okay, we've done, X% of the total initiatives that are part of our plan. But I will acknowledge that it was a struggle to get folks to understand the importance of initiatives that can't be attributed to a specific change in diversion, like an education program, like communications, things that are going to take time and money, but that don't have a specific, impact on diversion. But we sort of framed it as, these are the complementary or even in some cases foundational elements of the plan that support the initiatives that do have a direct impact on diversion.
Yeah. Derek, did you have anything you want to add?
Same for everyone. And also one of the things we're really working on, which right now we're being very successful at, which is printing and not printing. Everyone's being able to use technology at home, which is great, but we've been really focused on trying to push our faculty to stop printing their slides and handing them out to every student in their classes, and trying to not only push students to let their faculty know that they don't want those printing, but also to rethink the use of technology in our classrooms and how can we utilize technology versus printing in a way that still is engaging. And we're excited to get back to that right now. Obviously, things have totally shifted, but that's definitely some place that we have focused a lot of our energy.
Got it. Just one quick follow-up comment that came across. The idea of using a waste per person per day or a waste per person per year as sort of trying to do a more of a more universal way of measuring. Just real quick, is anybody probably going that direction? It's a way of at least measuring the waste production and recovery.
We've been challenged to do that because actually building occupancy data is actually not as easy to come by as one would think, because how many people are in that building that day or that month, or but we're actually, with COVID, we are actually having that data now because everyone has to do check-ins before they're allowed to come to campus, so we actually know how many people are in a building, maybe better than we were before, but that's a little tricky. We can certainly do it on the campus, but then, how many students are on campus that day versus how many visitors we get, it gets a little bit tricky. I don't think it's as impactful at a higher level. I think it's more impactful at a building level or floor level.
Got it. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move on then. The same basic question, moving forward with implementation, now talking a little bit more about the communication and engagement side. So if anybody wants to start off, just from your experience, what is working, what isn't, what have been some of the opportunities that you've experienced so far?
I could start. Okay. It's certainly been difficult to keep the attention of the task force members and the community, particularly during COVID. And there always sort of feels like this peak in engagement, and then you sort of start to taper off, and I'm not completely sure how to solve that, besides just continuous momentum and communication. One interesting success that I will share, though, is something specific to my position at the university, which is that I was hired as part of our sustainability team. And the model of my position was that I would be incubated on the sustainability team for 2 years. Then I would transition to facilities in the custodial team. So it's a way of sort of getting me, up to speed on the sustainability side of the university, and then being able to spread that those principles and ideas to other parts of the university and integrate them into the operations side of things. And that transition was supposed to happen a little later. It's actually happening now because of COVID, and it's going well. I have more direct access to custodians, to our area managers, to building coordinators. So I'm really able to have more of a direct voice with those people being in the facilities side now.
Great. That's a really good point.
I think one of the opportunities that's going on right now, or it's about to start, is the Eco Challenge. And I think a lot of universities are involved in this Eco Challenge as well. It happens in October. But for us, since so many of us are working from home, we have about 80% of our employees that are working from home. And so connecting and engaging virtually is a huge challenge. But what I love about the Eco Challenge is that it's a personal commitment that you're making. So you can see the impact that you have when you're working at home as well as in the office. And then it's an opportunity for us, when employees sign up for the Eco Challenge, then we can continue to communicate our message around zero waste and where we're going with waste. So using kind of those virtual engagements while we're not in the office, and reminding people what we're trying to do within our own operations, I think is just critical right now.
Adding on to what Mary was saying, and not because of our zero waste plan, but what we're doing for work from home, because we're in the same boat where most people are working from home, is we're setting up a Zoom session with local city representatives of their recycling programs. So since people at home are, if they're all living in San Francisco or San Jose or whatever city, we're going to pick 5 of them and have someone come talk to those people. Because these are people who work at Stanford, but they're actually working in someone else's community and impacting someone else's community. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of connect that there so that they know what their program is at home. It's no use of me talking about how we recycle on campus when they're not on campus. And they more importantly need to know what's going on at home, and maybe adding some energy and water features on that too, but starting out with waste.
Can I join that? That sounds awesome.
Please.
No, I join Julie's program from Berkeley. Awesome. We might steal that if that's okay, Julie. Switching gears completely, because we have taken the landfill option out of our building, we had some serious challenges and opportunities in terms of communication and education of our stakeholders about what that means for them and why we're doing it. I think one of the things that was hard for all of us was trying to explain what the difference is when you ask folks to pack out their landfill. What is that? What's the difference, right? I'm just putting it out 20 feet outside. And, our messaging has always been, well, we are really trying to make you think about what you have in your hand and where it needs to go, right? So when we take out that landfill option and you just see the green and blue bins, you take that second longer to say, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this, right? And that allows us to educate people more. It also kind of shocks people when we, do our orientations to say there are no landfill bins in this building. So you need to figure out how to either pack your stuff out, or more importantly, what we want you to do is come up with different options. We want you to think about what your purchasing power is and what you have in your hand and how you might be able to make a different choice to be able to put it in the compost bin or the recycling or reuse. So that's been something that has been a major, communication and engagement piece that we have to continually work on with all of our different stakeholders. But I think in the end, it's been super helpful for keeping our diversion rates at 90+.
My question to follow up on that is, overall, it has been successful, though. You're not finding contamination is becoming, it's been an ongoing problem. Is that fair?
I mean, there's contamination. I mean, that definitely is happening. But as we're doing our waste audits, we're finding that the contamination rates are not as large as we thought. And as you've all mentioned, we're able to look at what is the Bobo teacups, that are constantly being put in the recycling bin. And we can say to folks, you can't recycle this, you need to pack your Bobo teacup out. Or, our caterers, this particular item is not actually compostable. So it's been an education piece. I will not lie to you. There is definitely contamination, but it is not at the, at the end that we would have imagined it to be. So folks have really kind of come on board and have been doing a good job.
The sky has not fallen, which I imagine some might have predicted. It's certainly, from my experience, there are so many assumptions about culture, what people are willing to do, and we're so trained over the last 60, 70 years towards this sort of concierge level of trash convenience. It's hard to envision the fact that people can change, but with a lot of practices, with desk side, if you have people having to walk to centralize, a lot of these things that we assume people will never be willing to do, it could take a lot of effort, a lot of education, but people are pretty adaptable in the end, and it's a matter of that strategy for how you get them on board.
Yeah, and a lot of patience and a lot of just keep talking through it, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Any other points with communication engagement? Anyone wants to add in? Okay, then before we close, the last topic, let's take a few minutes just to talk about the upstream and the procurement side, and learn a little bit more about what efforts you're making on that end, beyond just simply moving the waste, but trying to actually address waste before it gets produced. Does anyone want to take a first stab at that?
I will. This is Sue. And with COVID, we've in some locations gone backwards, it's not a step or two, it's like 20, where some of these guys are very scared of COVID. And not only have they gone from using your own coffee cup or water cup to a fully wrapped cup that now has got, it's just so much packaging with it. If you think of the cup that you get in a hotel room that's just fully wrapped, that's what we're seeing, where we used to have just durables. There was no disposables at all in a site, and we went backwards. My biggest scare is they become a convenience, and then it'll take us longer to get back to our durables that are just sitting on a shelf. I think a large part of the procurement side of things is really evaluating the things that each of us can change or make a comment about. Whether you start with Amazon, I used to send them back all their plastic each and every time they kept sending it to me, or the box was too big. Those are easy to recycle. But if I look at the procurement side of things, does it need to come that way? If we have, and some don't have them anymore, but a common area that you pick up pens and pencils, those items sometimes come individually wrapped, even though you're buying 100 of them. And so how do we work with contracts to say, we're a zero waste facility, or we want to be, we need you to, the procurement team, the Staples, Office Depot, whomever that is, to really take a good stance on what you're sending out. I don't know if any of you guys have ordered from Amazon recently, but a family member did, and it was a really cool packaging. I actually had to go and look it up to see if all of it was recyclable, which it is. They're starting to label them much better with recycle too. I think that's great. But as a company, as a campus, we're buying in bulk. We need to receive them in bulk, and we've got to make the companies that we work with learn so that what we do as a whole and in a big place, they start using in a smaller place for all these others that don't have that buying power. My 2 cents.
I want to talk about, well, I'm planting some seeds right now about what the break room of the future looks like. We would have said that the break room would have had reusables in it, and it would have, and then secondarily compostable serviceware in the break room. And, you know, the fight against reusables is real. We're trying to work on that. But what if we didn't supply either? You know, what if, like with HP giving out your zero waste starter kit, everyone, we instead invest in a zero waste starter kit, and that's what everyone gets, and that's what is there. So just trying to plant the seed for people to think differently before we run off and buy all kinds of single-use plastics, which is not safer sitting in a drawer than you know, reusable things. So just having that conversation. In our labs, we're looking at, we're doing some studies on, for instance, lab glass. And there's all kinds of lab glass. There's quite hazardous lab glass and less hazardous lab glass, and looking at purchasing and why people purchase certain things and examining that, as well as looking and working with a group of people. I think Roy Weedman from JLL is on the call. We're working with a group of biotech and universities on lab plastics and seeing what we can do upstream as well as downstream with that specific materials, which is unique from your regular bottles and cans. So we are looking at some procurement and trying to dive into the data. These are really large data sets that you have to kind of go through to figure out, but also knowing that, I don't know about other places, but central procurement is a bit of a misnomer. Procurement happens throughout the entire university at all kinds of levels, and it's really tricky to work on that. But you have to start where you can and make progress, set examples, set the business case, and then keep moving.
Mm-hmm. Julie, are you or is anybody else working with pouring right contracts, trying to restructure contracts specifically on the beverage side?
No.
Okay.
We're planning to at Boston University. That was part of the conversations we had when developing the plan. We're in a contract now where we can't make many changes. We have a quota that we need to hit of materials that we buy, but upon renewal of that contract, we're planning to have a very different conversation to align more with our goals.
Great. Other general thoughts of folks wanting to address on the upstream side of steps you're taking? And maybe I'll throw out one specific example. I know I've spoken with a number of universities that have worked with their office supply contracts with Staples or Office Depot and been able to put in place reusable crates options. So for certain consistent purchasing where things could be packaged from the sort of the warehouse stage, rather than sending each of those in individual cardboard boxes, having a closed loop system with for office supplies. Does anybody have any other examples along those lines?
I think that's a great example, Alec, and we've tried to do that with some of our largest office supply vendors using reusable tote bags that are returned. So really, like, using our purchasing power as a university, right, to push those large suppliers to meet those kind of requests. And we have a sustainable purchasing program that has not been formally launched yet, but that's very near to the finish line. And in that, we have measures to make zero waste a part of the conversation when putting things out to bid, when renewing contracts, during annual business reviews with suppliers, so to integrate more of our zero waste goals in the choice of who we use for a vendor. And I think that's how we're looking to probably influence most significantly the partnerships with our vendors.
And we have we have scorecards for our vendors, and so establishing benchmarks in our scorecard, and then on our QBRs, really holding them accountable, and then also recognizing the vendors that do a great job. So it's really just driving that visibility at the scorecard level. I think has been a good lesson for us.
I was just gonna mention just recently, because we've moved to setting up virtual classrooms, we got a huge shipment of electronics and so forth. And so I got the call with the pictures of all the styrofoam and the boxes and just huge massive amounts of stuff. And one of the things that I did was call the vendor and say, I'm sending you back this styrofoam, will you take it? And they said yes. And so, I mean, I think just even asking those questions, and yes, it is, we would like to jumpstart that so that we already have that in place before they leave, is that we can then just put it right back on the truck like we did the pallets. But just having the beginning placement of starting those conversations so that next time when this happens, we know that that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're going to put that styrofoam that they can reuse to pack up their sound bars and put it right back on the truck and do it again. And so obviously that's a one-off, but I think those then create vendors that we can utilize and just systems that are already in place.
Yep, great. Just as a quick poll question, how many of your organizations have procurement, actual formalized policies in place? It's on some level trying to address green procurement. Maybe just as a show of hands. Okay. Mary, there was a quick question. The scorecard you referenced, is that something that you would be willing to share? Is that a publicly shareable document that can be made available?
I'll have to check on that. I'm not in procurement, but I'll check with them to see. If not, at least we could probably share just the framework of what it is.
Okay, great.
And I would add that,
go ahead, Julie.
I would add that the UC system has also something similar. Dan, or maybe you're more familiar with it, but that is another good model to use.
That's at a much higher pay grade than myself, but yes, Lynn probably has that. And I know that there's definitely, the UC obviously has big buying power, so they are working on all those things, and it's trickling down to places like Haas.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Good. So we're getting to the end of our program. I did have one question from earlier on. This is going back to the behavior side, and was actually coming from somebody who was with middle school, which is a little bit outside of your core areas, but just to share an example of where in this example, he has students who are in 6th grade and 7th grade. He finds that they're easier to engage, and then as they get older, they tend to drop off with their his ability to engage them around recycling, reduce, reuse. From any of your experience, any suggestions on how you sort of, I guess, re-engage and folks who might be on the younger level and get them excited and to participate?
I think,
sorry,
go ahead.
Julie.
No, go ahead.
Incentivize, incentivize, incentivize. Lots of prizes, lots of raffles, lots of fun things when you get involved.
Yeah, and I would argue like beach cleanups and kind of cleanups help help conversations to happen. How did this get here? What could we have done to not have it get here? And simple conversations like that help kids get their mind wrapped around how this works.
Yeah, and I would have, from my experience, every every demographic, each group has different values, different interests, and it's really about understanding what it is that's engaging them at their level. What are their interests, and how do you frame things in a way that's relevant to their values? And that just kind of takes studying and understanding of your audience.
There was an app I saw at a conference that I think it was in the city of Oakland, that you could take a photo of whatever waste you saw while you're walking, and they were doing it at some schools for the students to take photos and then compiling those photos and sending it back to the originator. And what the city was then doing is talking about, okay, what is the impact in terms of cost and our own diversion, and really making some meaningful changes with things that you find on playgrounds, you know. So so there are some cool apps out there too to get younger people involved.
Yeah.
I think that app is called Literati, if I remember correctly, based out of Oakland.
Yeah.
Great. Good. We have some more questions. We're not going to be able to get to, I'm afraid, just because we are getting to the end of the program. I will pass around to our panelists after the program is over some of the questions we received, and ask if they can take a few minutes just to respond where they have something to offer. And then we will be following up after the webinar to share some of the follow-up links, including access to the recording, so we can include responses with that as we most likely early next week. Thank you for each of you for participating. This has been fantastic. It's been great to hear what you're all doing on your respective campuses or institutions. So thank you very much for participating. Couple last things, just a reminder, we have upcoming webinars in 2 weeks. Roughly every 2 weeks we're doing these programs, and the next one is going to be focused on reduce and reuse. And just like today, the registration is free if you are already registered and signed up for the Zero Waste Conference itself. If not, it is available as an a la carte that you can purchase to sign up for. But you can find the full details, the descriptions for all these webinars on the Zero Waste, the zwconference.org website. And again, want to give a shout out and a thank you to our sponsors for making this program possible. We would not be able to do it without your support, so thank you very much. And I think that brings us to the end of our program. So thank you everybody for joining us. Have a good rest of your day, and good luck moving your own institutions forward towards the zero waste end goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.